Hello. This is Dr. Hines. Today, I want to talk about on this submission. I want to talk about, as a parent, what do you do and how do you respond when your child doesn't communicate with you? How do you respond when there's a disconnect between you and your child? So, I'll give you two scenarios where I faced this um, in my profession. Um, I had a parent call me one day from her job, and she was very distraught because um, her and her child, for whatever reason, there's a disconnect, and the parent wanted to kind of have a conversation to kind of see what was going on, and the parent went out and got the child's favorite food and told them to come to the you know he was to have an eating kitchen, to come in the kitchen. The child was very upset about that, and the parents started, serve the food and just trying to create communication. Just said, how was your day? And I cut to the chase. I just want to talk to you. I feel like we're becoming distant. And the child just slammed their head on the table and just went to the room, closed the door, left the food on the table, and the parent was very distraught, and I guess called me for advice. Second scenario, and this has happened a lot of times in my profession. Uh, for those of you who don't know, currently I'm a school counselor. I've been a assistant principal, academic coordinator, a lot of positions. But right now I'm focusing on, students, and I really love being a school counselor, especially, you know, with our kids coming back from COVID. And so uh, had a parent come in, explain to me, the child is having some attendance issues. The child is not coming to school regularly. The child is not performing well. The child is close to being able to graduate, but there's a disconnect. And so the parent decided to have a, conversation with student, parent, me. And let me just park there and say, to some parents, that's a great idea. But to some parents, be careful when you schedule that meeting. Be very careful. Um, so the child came into the meeting and the parent started talking, and the child didn't say much anything. And then the parent started to direct, concern, and it kind of switched to, uh, you know, this is an important part of your life. You need to, you need to, and very quickly that child just had enough and simply said, I don't know who you're trying to impress, but you're coming in here acting like you are someone that you're not. So if we're going to be truthful in this conversation, let's tell all the truths first. Let's tell all the facts first. And the parent was like, what, you know, wait a minute, this is to help you. And it quickly switched to the child telling me what was really going on in the household. And the parent didn't want that to come out. And so for any parent that has a disconnect with their child, the number one advice I will give you, and I have a couple of things I'll go over in this submission, but the number one thing you should always do is you have to know the history. Because students that are, you know, 16, 17, 18 years old, they have a sense of what has happened. They have their opinion about what has happened. And they have their opinion about you. And if you, as a parent, guardian, caregiver, are either new to their life and you really don't know the child's story, or if you've been there but you kind of been in and out of their lives, or if anything has happened with you that in the child's mind has disrupted their upbringing up to this point, there is no safe secret. So be honest when you talk to the child that you're talking about the child that is sitting in front of you, and you know the history, and you need to acknowledge the history. Now, this is the hardest part for parents because parents sometimes want to make the conversation about the child. We're not talking about me now. We're not talking about the mistakes I've made. We're talking about you and what you need to do so that you can be successful in school and graduate and all of this, go to college, go to the military, go to trade, whatever you're going to do. But I'm kind of surprised, like, how do you expect the child to move forward and focus on themselves when for the vast majority of their life, they've had to fight for themselves? But that's the part you left out in our pre-conversation. And so now that your child is here telling the family business or whatever the situation is, now we get a whole different picture. And so first of all, like I said to parents and caregivers, you have to know the history and you have to acknowledge the history. There's some history that may have happened that you weren't even around. You weren't a part of. There may have been some negative instances and situations that child has endured and you were not there, either through choice or through force. But that does not mean that situation has not impacted the child. You can't have a breakthrough with a child unless you understand the ground that is surrounding it. In other words, if you're growing a garden, if I'm trying to use some sort of analogy here, if you're beginning a garden, and you have to break the ground, you have to turn over the soil, which means you have to really understand what type of soil am I dealing with in order to grow whatever I'm trying to grow. Do I need to add fertilizer? Do I need to add nutrients to the soil so that when I plant these seeds or I plant these plants into this ground, it will take root and grow? Because if I just throw seeds down and I don't do anything with the ground, it's a 90% chance that seed is not going to take root. It's just like throwing seeds on a floor and expecting it to take root. I'm just going to throw water on the floor and hope it flourishes. And I think a lot of times that's how some parents and some caregivers really think about the child. And I know you're like, yeah, but I thought the premise of this was to say or to speak to, how to talk to your child when they're not talking with you. Well, you have to understand why they're not talking to you. Do they see you as a help or do they see you as a hindrance? Because if you're not helping them, if you're making mandates on them about what they should and should not be doing, but when they needed the help, you were nowhere to be found, it's hard. And I say this to parents all the time because I always get that follow-up conversation. And I say to parents all the time, you can never make up for the time that you missed. You can never make up for the time that you were there, but you weren't there. And you know what that is. You may have changed your life around and, you had a bad spot in your life, but now you're trying to change your life around, but that child remembers everything. And as you're trying to make a change, that child may not be in a position to forget and move on. I've heard so many parents say this, well, you just need to forget it and move on. If only it were that easy. If only it worked that way, that I could just forget and move on and not accept what actually has happened to me. There's some situations I've sat in with parents and the child was, I don't know, I can go through a list of things. Sexually molested. They were abandoned. The parent or guardian had a bit of an incarceration. They were locked up for a particular time. They were on drugs. They were alcoholics. They lived a whole nother life and kind of left that child behind. And now they're trying to reconnect all of these things. And that child doesn't forget. How can you connect with something and you're not being honest about the past? And to be able to admit that the past occurred. I can't tell you how many parents I've talked to said, well, the child just needs to get over it. That was then. This is now. Well, if only life were that easy. I always use this analogy. 90% of the jobs that you apply to will always ask for a background check. Why? Because they hear you, they see you. You're this great candidate for this job, and you have all these expertise and this enthusiasm you can bring, but we need to check your background. We need to see, have you gotten in any legal situations that cause you to be incarcerated? Do you have any felonies? Do you have any misdemeanors? Some jobs even do a credit background. How's your credit? How are you with money? This job involves dealing with the budget. How are you with money? Because we hear what you say, but we want to know your past. And I hate to say it, in a lot of jobs, they judge you based on your past. You get the job or you don't get the job based on your past. So you have to know the history. You have to admit to the history. And you also have to realize and come to the conclusion in some instances, based on the severity of the past, based on the severity of the issue, that child may not want to talk to you. That child may not feel comfortable at all having a conversation with you about their disconnect with you. They may not trust you. They may love you, and some may not love you. They may respect who you are, whether you are a biological parent, whether you're a godparent, whether you're a relative, whether you are court appointed, whatever. But that doesn't mean that they trust you. Loving you is a choice. Respecting you is a choice to some degree, but loving you is a choice. I can live under your roof and do what you tell me to do when you tell me to do, but that doesn't mean I love you. That just means I'm following orders and I'm being compliant. And I think a lot of times parents confuse love and respect. You go to school on time. You come home after school. You do whatever chores are given to you. You're just being respectful. You're not talking to me in a very sarcastic way. That doesn't mean I love you. That just means I'm respecting you. And some parents are fine with just the respect. They think that's the way things are supposed to go. But little do they know that child has no belief in you, no trust in you, and doesn't love you not one bit. So you have to understand when the situation or the issue or the roadblock between the two of you is bigger than what you can handle. And the last thing I will say is seek help. Therapy. And I know I have a lot of parents that say, well, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. You at least, I feel, you need to introduce therapy. I can get you to talk to someone that's not me, that's unbiased, and see if the two of you can talk about it. And I will tell you, there are some children, some students, some teenagers like, nope, I don't want to talk to anybody. Nope, I don't want to do it. And I hate to tell you, but therapy does not work unless they buy in. A lot of people will go and say, well, I'm going to take you to someone at the church or wherever we worship, and you're going to talk to somebody there. That may work, or it may not. Sometimes they may not buy into a therapist, but they'll buy into someone that they trust. Some family member that they trust. Maybe a basketball coach or a football coach or someone that lives across the street that kind of has seen everything. But you have to be careful with who that child talks to. Because everybody that they talk to may not have the child's best interest in mind. And some people use that information to benefit themselves. So you have to be very cognizant. I'm always an advocate of therapy. I know with most jobs that people have, they have insurance plans, and you can get therapy for your child. If your situation has it, and I get them all mixed up all the time, Medicaid, Medicare, you can get a therapist. And sometimes it's a right fit with a therapist. Your child may want to talk to a woman or a man or someone of a specific ethnic background that's in a particular age. And there are a multiplicity of therapists out there. So I guess if I can sum this up, because I can go on and on and on about this. If you want to be able to talk to your child, the first thing is you have to be honest with your child. If you're not willing to be honest and you want to smooth stuff over, or you just want to get to, I don't want to talk about the past, I just want to talk about you in school and why you're not talking, then it's that conversation is not going to work. I'm sorry. It's not going to work. And you're actually wasting your time. Because before you opened up your mouth, that kid has already had a definition in their mind about who they think you are. And when you take the situation, or when you take the reality of what has happened and you move it to the side and you don't face it or deal with it, that's exactly how they're going to take it, and that's exactly how they're going to deal with you. And they're not going to open up. Or they'll just sit in your face and say nothing. Lack of communication is based on something. Something happened. Whether something was done, whether something was said. And that's why you have to know the truth. And a lot of parents and guardians, they know the truth. They know what happened. And they try to sweep it up under the rug. And I don't want to talk about that. Well, if you don't want to talk about it, I can assure you, your child does not want to talk about it with you. And I know this message may fall on the ears of someone that does not agree with anything that I'm saying. And for that, I can say, live your life. And there may be people who disagree with me, but I've done this long enough that I speak this with absolute conviction and truth. Until a parent is willing to have a conversation about the truth, we're never going to get to the point that they begin to even listen to you in the slightest. I'll give you one story that happened to me. I was a school counselor at a high school years ago, and I was dealing with a student. He was an athlete, but he used to get in a lot of confrontations. And, you know, he was a gifted athlete. 6'5", was all-state football player, played basketball, just was a gifted athlete, built athletically. But anybody this student had a conflict with, male or female, it always ended in a physical confrontation. He did not do a lot of talking. You know, I worked in inner city schools, and he did not do a lot of talking. He had a history of, he would confront coaches. He would confront adults in the building. He would confront, male students, female students. He had no problem, no issue at all. And I think it was one meeting, he got into a situation, and I could tell there was something going on, because he was just so rigid. And I never forget it. He came in, and his grandmother came, and we were sitting at the table, and she was like, you need to get your life right, and then she said the magic words that he had been waiting to hear, and it changed the entire conversation. I know we haven't done right by you, and I know you have issues with your father, but you need to get over that, because you're about to be an adult now. And right at that point, everything changed. He's completely snapped. Tears were rolling from his eyes. And I don't know how I did it, but I was able to table that meeting. And the next meeting we had a few days later was with him, his father, the grandmother, I think one other family member. And we started that conversation, and that young man could not get 2 sentences in, and the tears started rolling, and the truth came out. And the grandmother and the father were like, I didn't expect you to go there. I thought you would have moved on. And he asked questions that he had been holding within him since he was 7 years old. And it was the root of his anger, because of whatever happened to him. And I'm not going to get all into specifics of that, but I'm telling you this story to support what I say, if you want to have a conversation with your child, you got to know the facts. You got to know the history. You got to admit that whatever happened, happened. And you have to also realize that maybe the conversation that child needs to have may not be with you. If it can happen, maybe with you and another family member that knew what happened, sometimes that child just needs to seek clarity. Why did this happen? Why did this occur to me? Okay, that's great, because that's a start. That's a start. Trust me when I tell you, these 16, 17, 18-year-old children, they understand that we can't go back in time and change anything. They're well aware of that. But they just want truth that what happened to me happened to me. And you wonder why I'm not speaking to you. You wonder why we don't have this grand, cohesion between each other. It's because of something happened. It could be something small that you think was small as a parent, as a guardian, as a caregiver, or it could be something huge that you just really don't even want to talk about. But it's important to talk about it, because even as adults, we remember things that have happened to us in our childhood. And if we're not able to deal with it, we will carry it on throughout our lives. So, that's my submission for the day. Until next time, this is Dr.